everyone, welcome to another episode of NFI Hammer. In this episode, I will be painting my largest miniature yet, a Canoptic Doomstalker. So this is the first Warhammer kit that I've bought in an individual box like this, and it's also going to be the largest model I've ever painted. So let's see what mistakes I make and how I go. Let's get into it. I actually bought this model a few months ago, but I've been waiting for a special occasion before I open it. And what better occasion is it to celebrate 300 subscribers? Honestly, when I started doing these videos, I thought I'd be lucky if I got 5 or 10 people that would be interested in my journey. So to get this many is absolutely mind-boggling, and I'm blown away by the love and support of the miniature painting community. If you do enjoy this video, or you just want to throw your support my way, feel free to subscribe. It's totally free and you can undo it at any time. Otherwise, feel free to leave a comment and any tips or tricks that you want to share, or just any comments in general. I have been able to reply to every comment, so if you do leave one, rest assured that I will get back to you. The assembly for these models are actually pretty straightforward. I've kind of noticed the bigger the model, almost the easier it is to assemble, which seems like a kind of counterintuitive, I think, but then I guess if you think about it more, it kind of makes sense that there's less small fiddly parts. It's also a push together model, so this time I decided to try something different and not glue it all together so that I could paint these sections individually. I've been wanting to try out this method before, but I thought there'd be no better opportunity than the 300 subscriber special. I'm also going to spray paint it with my black spray paint that I got from Bunnings. I've got a bit of a gloss to it, so I'm not totally in love with it, but it does the job, and because this model has a lot of dark details, I think it would save me a lot of effort with having to paint it all with the Baden black. Unfortunately though, when I was spray painting it, the spray can exploded and paint went everywhere. So that was not fun. So for the rest of the video you'll see that I'll have black spray paint on my fingers. But the model still came out okay. It does have a kind of a bit of a shine to it. So here I'm just trying to make sure that I can dry fit the pieces together. And I'm inspecting the tripod or quad pod, and I've noticed that there's actually a sprue connecting two of the legs together, which I had missed when I was cutting it and preparing it. So I'm going to have to do that after I've primed it. So I've never done this before. I've always managed to catch my mistakes like this beforehand, but it wasn't too big a deal to fix up. However, I did notice there's a little bit still left on there that I'll just clean with my hobby knife. But other than that, so far it's been very smooth sailing, getting the model together and getting all the parts together. I think because all the parts are so unique and symmetrical that it's very straightforward. So I'm going to start off with a Runelord Brass as an undercoat, to make sure that, with these Necrons, this typically makes up the majority of the piece. So I'm trying to avoid getting it too much into the dark crevices, because I like to leave them black for dramatic contrast effect. But you can see there I am getting some in the crevices, but generally here with like the little grooves, I'm just trying to leave them as dark as possible, just because it makes my life easier. And this is just the first coat that I'm putting on. However, off camera I do go back and I do another coat, just because it's pretty boring to watch second and third coats being applied. But you just kind of want a consistent look and feel. I think with the dark undercoat, that if you don't go over it, it will kind of show through. So I'm just doing the upper segments of the legs, the brass color, and then I'm using Rhinox Hide for the bottom. So this is something that I developed when I was doing the Canoptic spider. Check out that video if you haven't seen it. But it just kind of gives it a bit more interesting kind of dynamic to the model, rather than all being the one color. Moving on to the base now, I'm doing it in Rakarth Flesh. I'm kind of regretting that decision because it's not a very good colour and I have a lot better colours now, but I'll just continue with it and just see where it goes. Hopefully I can recover and redeem it. With a second coat applying, it already starting to look a little bit better. But I think I'll need to come back and revisit the base, and maybe I can use my different textures rather than the sand that I've been using, but I'll save that for another video for another day. I've also noticed that there's some metal in here, so I've painted that already. Moving on to Leadbelcher now. This is where weapons and sort of the more delicate machinery of the Necron, I use this colour, and also the pipe down the bottom of the model. And so I kind of try and use this kind of theory of different materials would just be painted different colours, and it just makes it a lot easier. And so once you kind of got that mental picture, it's kind of obvious what to paint. I've also then started using this technique that I discovered during this model, was that if I let the paint dry on the paintbrush a little bit, it can kind of be used as a highlighter by just dragging it along the edges. So I did this here in the black section at the top because it's very dark, it's all the one color, so it's kind of very hard to see the individual details. So by dragging the dried brush across it, kind of created a bit of definition between the sections. And anywhere that I went a bit too crazy, I would just go back up later with the bat and black and just try and straighten out the edges. But I think it gives it a nice detail, and I did it on the bottom segment of the Rhinox Hide of the legs as well, and I'm really impressed with how it kind of turned out. It's probably the favourite part of the model for me, was the bottom segment of the legs, so I'll show a video at the end. Then moving on to Moot Green, this is where I just paint everything that I think is green on the model. Here I was trying to use a watered down version to kind of drip it into the crevices, but I kind of made a bit of a mess and it went everywhere. So I had to come back later with a bat and black and fix it up. But using this technique of watering it down was definitely a lot easier to kind of get the paint into the crevices. I generally haven't bothered doing this with my other Necron models, but because this model is so large, it's very obvious, and I thought the extra attention to detail would really help elevate the model into something quite different. I do think I need to get a little bit better at not getting the paint everywhere. So I'm using the same technique here for the weapon at the top, and to me I was trying to tell a story about the gauze energy coming from the center of the reactor and kind of spreading throughout the model and channeling it into the weapons and a little bit into the legs as well to power the movement. And now I'm just kind of painting the face of the model and part of the reactor as well. So I thought I would try to do something that I've never done before, which is wet blending. So I've got this Averland Sunset that I was going to try and mix in with my Moot Green, and I think I took wet blending way too literally, and I put way too much water onto the paintbrush, and so I kind of ended up just drowning it. I kind of, definitely took wet blending too literally and made a bit of a mess here. And so I'm trying to recover, but I don't think this was a good situation to practice wet blending in. I think maybe a bigger section and a flatter section would have been a lot better. And so I've realized my mistake here, and I'm trying to brush some of it off. So eventually I kind of managed to get some of the colors melded together, but full disclaimer, I have NFI idea what I'm doing. Please don't copy me. Unless you want to have a disaster. So I end up doing something, but I don't know if it's wet blending or not, but it looks okay in the end, so I've just decided to kind of leave it here. I have to go back later and touch up some of the silver areas that I ended up getting some of the paint in. Then I'm just finishing all the other areas just with the normal Moot Green color. Just trying to avoid getting mess into places I don't want to, but I end up doing most of the time anyway and having to go back and tidy up. I really think this hobby you can do two sort of ways. You can do it with skill or you can just do it with patience, and for me it's just with patience. Just because whenever I make a mistake you can always kind of go back and fix it up with the opposite colour. All in all, it's sort of a very basic Necron, just a scale much larger than any of the others. There hasn't really been any parts of this model that is kind of quite unique or different. I'm still happy how it's shaping up. It reminds me of those tripods from War of the Worlds, and I think it looks really epic and intimidating. Also, at the 10th edition combat patrols for Necrons is rumoured to have these models included in it, so I'm very excited to try my first game of Warhammer, and I think a Necron combat patrol would be a great place for me to start. Definitely wanting to get my army battle ready. So then the next thing I apply is an Agrax Earthsahde over the brass colours. I've kind of gone flip-flopped on this, whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think I now understand that shade kind of helps stain the colours to kind of give it a bit more depth, as well as also pulling into the recesses to create shadow. So I think something like this makes sense, otherwise it kind of is a bit bright. I've also put it over the rubble as well, just to try and make it a bit more interesting. And then I've moved on to Nuln Oil that I apply over the silver, and I also just put it anywhere that I think adding some shadows into the crevices would help make the model stand out a little bit better. The next technique I use is dry brushing, and I have used dry brushing before, but this is using a makeup brush that I stole from my wife, but she doesn't watch my videos anymore, so hopefully she doesn't find out. So what I'm doing is I've applied the dry brush to my hand, which was a tip that someone left in the comments below. However, I think I picked a terrible colour to try it out on because my skin is so pale and the paint is so white that it's very hard to see. And I'm not really sure, it doesn't really feel like anything is actually coming out of the dry brush. However, after a few layers, I do start to notice that the edges do get a bit of white on that, but the effect is quite subtle, so I'm not really sure if it's working as intended. I go and put more paint onto the brush and I don't get as much of it off, and then I applied it to the rubble and too much paint was left on it, so I ended up kind of ruining one of the sections, but the rest of it looked alright. Another tip that the same person left behind was to use the rust and a watered down version and let it kind of drip against the metal. So here I'm using my orange colour, but the second I applied it I realised I had completely messed up the water to paint ratio and it was just too thick and too much paint. So I tried to suck some of it out by using a dry brush, but unfortunately I just kind of end up spreading it everywhere. And so I just kind of went along with it, and it was kind of too late to, back out now. So I kind of just applied the rust to all the crevices that I, thought it would look good at, and then I'll just come back later with the base silver color and fix it up. So this is what it looks like after I fix it up, and I think it looks okay. It's definitely different to the sponge approach that I used in one of my previous videos. It kind of makes sense that the rust would kind of coagulate in the crevices like that. I also really like the attention to details. They've got a little mini scarab, Necron scarab here, which reminds me of the hidden Mickeys at Disneyland. I just thought it was a really nice touch. So to finish off the model, I'm using Retributor Armour, and I'm just going over the glyphs with it. This kind of ties it into the other models that I've done. I've used a lot of gold on the hieroglyphs, and I thought it'd just help bring my army together as a cohesive unit. I'm just being very careful that I don't accidentally put any of this onto the black. And this is the final product, so I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think that it looks really impressive. It's going to look amazing on the battlefield. As I said before, my favourite part is definitely the lower leg segment, so using the Rhinox Hide but then with the silver edge highlighting just gives it a really like weathered, battle-hardened, look to it, and I think makes it stand out quite separate. I do like all the, green. I don't usually go so green on the Necrons. I don't like how there's a lot of black still. I feel like I could maybe have coloured in some of the black a different colour to make it interesting, but yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I couldn't have thought of a better model to paint for 300 subscribers. So if you like this video or you have any tips you want to share, please leave a comment or like or subscribe below. Let me know what you want to see for 400 subscribers if I ever hit that target. Anyway, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.